It was February 7th, 2003, and 17-year-old Jesica Santillan lay on the operating table, awaiting a life-saving heart and lung transplant at Duke University Medical Center. Her family had waited years for this moment, filled with hope that Jessica's suffering from a severe heart condition would soon be over. The air in the operating room was filled with tension and focus. As the medical team worked meticulously, everything appeared to be going as planned. A new beginning for Jesica was within reach. But what the doctors didn't realize was that they had made a catastrophic mistake. Unbeknownst to Jesica and her family, the donor organs that had been flown in from Boston were the wrong blood type. As the surgery proceeded, Jessica's body was set to receive organs that it would never accept. And in that moment, everything changed. What happened next would shock the nation. How could one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country make such a fatal error? And how did this life-saving procedure turn into a tragic disaster? Before we move into the details of this heartbreaking case, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated on all our latest documentaries. Now, let's unravel the tragic events that followed Jessica's surgery and explore how a preventable mistake altered not only her life, but raised serious questions about medical protocols and safety in hospitals across the nation. Jesica Santillan was born in 1985 in the rural town of Tamazula, Mexico. She was the middle child in a close-knit family that struggled financially. Her early life was marred by severe health issues that became apparent as she grew older. Diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, Jessica's heart muscles became abnormally stiff, which restricted the heart's ability to pump blood efficiently. As a result, her body didn't receive the necessary oxygen, leaving her fatigued and often struggling to perform even the simplest physical activities. Walking short distances or playing with her siblings would leave her breathless and exhausted. To make matters worse, Jessica also suffered from pulmonary hypertension, a secondary condition that put dangerous levels of pressure on the blood vessels in her lungs. This combination of diseases posed a serious threat to her life, as both conditions exacerbated each other, creating a cascade of health challenges. Over time, her quality of life deteriorated drastically, leaving her increasingly frail and dependent on others. Her family, devastated by Jessica's declining condition, sought medical assistance from local doctors in Tamazula. However, the medical care available in their small town was limited. The doctors, while compassionate, were not equipped to manage such complex and rare conditions. They informed the family that Jessica's condition was terminal unless she could receive a heart and lung transplant. This surgery, which was highly specialized and extremely expensive, was not available anywhere in Mexico, and the local doctors advised that only a transplant in the United States could save her. Faced with the bleak reality that their daughter would not survive without the surgery, Magdalena Santillan, Jessica's mother, found herself at a crossroads. As a family living in poverty in rural Mexico, they had no financial means to pay for such an operation, let alone travel to a country where it could be performed. Still, Magdalena refused to give up hope. She knew that her daughter's life was in jeopardy, and decided that they had no choice but to leave Mexico and try to reach the United States, where Jessica could receive the medical care she so desperately needed. The decision was not an easy one. Leaving behind everything they knew in Mexico, including their family, home, and livelihood, was a daunting and uncertain choice. To further complicate matters, the family did not have legal permission to enter the U.S., so they would have to cross the border illegally, a journey fraught with danger. But Magdalena's love for Jessica was unshakable, and she was determined to give her daughter a fighting chance at life, even if it meant risking everything. In the year 2000, with Jessica's condition steadily worsening and time running out, her family embarked on the perilous journey northward. Without the financial means to secure legal passage, they sought the help of a coyote, a smuggler paid to guide them across the U.S.-Mexico border. The journey was fraught with dangers. Along the way, the family was ambushed by thieves who stole everything they had: money, personal belongings, and even Jessica's earrings, a small but sentimental possession that held value to the family. This assault left them more vulnerable than ever as they pressed on with little to no resources. Despite the overwhelming hardships, the Santillan family reached their destination, Durham, North Carolina, home to Duke University Medical Center, which was renowned for its expertise in organ transplants. Yet their arrival marked only the beginning of a new set of challenges. The cost of a heart and lung transplant was an astronomical $500,000, a figure far beyond anything the family could afford. Jessica's mother, Magdalena, was further burdened by the language barrier, as she spoke little English, and navigating the complex healthcare system in a foreign country without health insurance left her feeling powerless. Jessica's condition continued to decline rapidly, and the dream of securing medical help seemed like a distant hope. However, the local community soon became aware of the Santillan family's plight and rallied to support them. Their story reached the ears of Mac Mahoney, a local businessman who had suffered the tragic loss of his own son to a medical error years earlier. Deeply moved by Jessica's dire situation, Mahoney took it upon himself to lead a fundraising effort to cover the costs of the life-saving transplant. He reached out to local churches, businesses, and compassionate individuals, all of whom were eager to help. Donations quickly began pouring in from all corners of the community, and within a short period, the Santillan family had raised the necessary funds. The outpouring of support gave them more than just financial relief. It gave them hope. For a family that had felt isolated and alone in a foreign land, the generosity of strangers provided a sense of belonging and validation that their efforts to save Jessica were not in vain. With the funds secured, Jessica was officially placed on the transplant list. For the first time in years, the family had genuine hope for Jessica's future. They believed that the day was approaching when Jessica would receive the life-saving surgery she desperately needed, and that her long battle with illness might finally come to an end. As they anxiously awaited the call that would change their lives, the Santillans clung to that hope, knowing that the generosity of strangers had brought them closer to saving Jessica than they ever thought possible. But little did they know, their journey was far from over, and a series of tragic events would soon test the strength of their hope and resilience. On February 7th, 2003, after years of anticipation and anguish, the moment that Jesica Santillan's family had longed for finally arrived. A heart and lung donor had been located. Jessica, only 17, had endured 3 painful years on the transplant waiting list, suffering daily from restrictive cardiomyopathy and pulmonary hypertension, 2 serious conditions that left her heart too weak to pump blood efficiently and her lungs unable to supply sufficient oxygen to her body. These ailments had significantly diminished her quality of life, confining her to a frail existence. The organs, flown in from Boston to Duke University Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina, provided a glimmer of hope for Jessica and her family. Duke University Medical Center, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the country, was home to some of the nation's top surgeons, including Dr. James Jaggers, who was leading the surgical team that day. The operation was a delicate and complex procedure, but it promised Jessica a chance at life, a chance to escape the endless cycles of breathlessness, fatigue, and despair that had plagued her for years. Her family waited anxiously as the surgical team began the procedure, their hopes resting on this moment. However, in the midst of the surgery, a catastrophic error occurred, one that would forever change the lives of Jessica, her family, and everyone involved. The donor organs, flown in with such urgency, were a fatal mismatch. While Jessica's blood type was O positive, the donated heart and lungs were type A, a critical difference that the transplant team had overlooked. This fundamental oversight, failing to cross-check the blood compatibility, was an error of staggering proportions. It wasn't until the surgery was nearly completed that the medical team realized the mistake. the revelation came too late. Jesica had already received the incompatible organs. Almost immediately after the surgery, Jesica's body began rejecting the new organs. Her immune system, which had long battled her own failing heart and lungs, recognized the new organs as foreign invaders. It launched a violent attack, producing antibodies to destroy the transplanted tissues. This intense immune response set off a cascade of complications within her already fragile body. In a desperate effort to halt the rejection, the medical team administered powerful immunosuppressant drugs to dampen her immune response. They also performed plasmapheresis, a procedure designed to filter out the harmful antibodies attacking the organs. But these measures proved futile. Jesica's body was already in the throes of a full-blown rejection crisis. Over the next few days, Jesica's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. On February 10th, just 3 days after the transplant, she suffered a heart attack. Her body, already weakened by years of illness, could not handle the strain of the violent rejection process. She experienced multiple seizures and eventually suffered a stroke. The series of events overwhelmed her organs, and her kidneys began to fail. Jesica was placed on life support, and her family was informed that her situation had become critical. As the doctors worked tirelessly to find a second set of compatible organs, they were acutely aware that time was not on their side. To complicate matters, the Santillan family, who primarily spoke Spanish, struggled to understand the gravity of what was happening. The language barrier between them and the medical team further deepened their sense of helplessness. According to reports, Duke University Medical Center had downplayed the severity of the error, leaving the family unaware of the full extent of Jesica's deteriorating condition. Meanwhile, the public soon learned of the devastating mistake, and outrage grew as media outlets reported on the case. How could such a grave oversight occur at one of the country's leading hospitals? How could a young girl's chance at life slip away due to something as fundamental as a blood-type mismatch? As Jesica remained on life support, her family clung to the hope that another set of organs could be found. They prayed for a second chance, for another miracle that would allow Jesica to survive. But despite the medical team's efforts to locate new organs, her health continued to decline rapidly. The damage inflicted by the initial rejection was too severe. Jesica's body was deteriorating faster than any intervention could reverse. What had begun as a hopeful opportunity to save Jesica's life had now turned into a harrowing ordeal, with little hope for recovery. 2 agonizing weeks later, on February 20th, 2003, Jesica's medical team finally found a second set of heart and lung organs. Once again, the surgical team, led by Dr. Jaggers, rushed to perform the transplant. This time, they confirmed that the organs were compatible with Jesica's O-positive blood type. The surgery, performed with even greater caution, was technically successful, and the new organs began functioning immediately. However, the damage caused by the first botched transplant had already taken an irreversible toll. Jesica's brain had been deprived of oxygen during the initial transplant failure, leading to a series of strokes and seizures. Though her new heart and lungs worked as they should, her brain had been without oxygen for too long. Just 1 day after the second transplant, on February 21st, 2003, Jesica was declared brain dead. The doctors broke the devastating news to her family. Their daughter, who had been so close to receiving the surgery that could save her life, was now gone. The weight of their grief was amplified by the knowledge that Jesica's death had been entirely preventable. In the aftermath, Duke University Medical Center approached the family about the possibility of donating Jesica's remaining viable organs to other patients in need. However, still reeling from the trauma of their loss and guided by legal counsel, the family declined the hospital's request. They were devastated, not just by Jesica's death, but by the preventable error that had taken her life. The Santillan family struggled to come to terms with the sequence of events that had unfolded. How could a fatal mistake like this happen at one of the country's top hospitals? The language barriers and poor communication between the hospital staff and the family only made matters worse, as the family felt that they had not been adequately informed about the severity of Jessica's condition in the critical days after the first surgery. The hospital's failure to immediately admit the seriousness of the error left the family feeling misled and confused during one of the most devastating times of their lives. Mac Mahoney, a local businessman and philanthropist who had initially spearheaded the fundraising efforts for Jesica Santillan's heart and lung transplant, was devastated by the tragic outcome. Having personally invested time, effort, and hope into Jessica's case, Mahoney became an outspoken advocate for the family in the wake of the fatal medical error. He was particularly critical of Duke University Medical Center, accusing the hospital of mishandling the entire situation from the start. Mahoney's criticism centered around the hospital's failure to properly communicate the gravity of the situation to the Santillan family, as well as the fundamental errors in verifying organ compatibility before surgery. Mahoney pointed out that the hospital had misled the family who spoke little English. His public advocacy brought significant attention to the case, amplifying its visibility in national media. The story quickly gained traction, putting Duke University Hospital under intense scrutiny, both from the public and from the medical community. As the case grew, Duke University Medical Center launched an internal investigation, revealing multiple failures in the organ compatibility verification process. In particular, it was discovered that Dr. James Jaggers, the surgeon who performed the transplant, had assumed that the donor organs were a match without conducting thorough checks or cross-verification. The medical team also failed to communicate effectively with the Carolina Donor Services, the agency responsible for handling the organ donation. These lapses in procedure contributed to the tragic outcome. Facing a wave of negative press, Duke was forced to take immediate action to repair its damaged reputation. The hospital implemented stricter protocols to ensure that such a devastating mistake would not be repeated. These included multiple layers of cross-verification for organ compatibility and tighter oversight of the transplant process to guarantee that no assumption would go unchecked. Additionally, Duke overhauled its communication practices, particularly for non-English speaking families, to avoid future miscommunication and ensure families were fully informed about critical medical procedures. On the legal front, negotiations between Duke University Medical Center and the Santillan family began. After intense discussions, a confidential settlement was eventually reached, allowing the family to seek some measure of closure, though the terms remained undisclosed to the public. While the settlement provided financial relief, the emotional and psychological toll on the family was profound. The ordeal left them grieving not only for the loss of Jessica, but also for the preventable nature of her death. The tragedy of Jesica Santillan's story raises many difficult questions about the safeguards in place within the medical community. Could more thorough checks have saved her life? What can be done to ensure that such fatal errors never happen again? And how does a family find closure when a life is lost due to a preventable mistake? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think should be done to improve medical protocols? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story important and want to learn more about cases like Jessica's, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we hope these discussions bring attention to the critical need for safety and care in every medical procedure.